Hello and welcome back to the NSE5 journey with me, Ryan. In this next section we're going to start the policy and objects. We've just finished the device manager settings and the system settings prior to that. We're going to move on to these policy and objects, and then after the policy and objects going into login reporting. For those who don't know, you can contact me here on YouTube, on LinkedIn or Twitter. So here's the overview of the plan for the NSE5 journey. The first 5 section is going to be primarily around the FortiManager, and once the FortiManager has been completed, we're going to move on to the FortiAnalyzer. We've completed our introduction, we've gone through the system settings, we've just finished Device Manager, and now we're here on number 4, the policy and objects. This should be covered over the next couple of videos. Now before I dive in to the policy and objects, there was a question that was asked on one of the videos, and it was a valid question, and I think that we should explore this together. The question was, what would happen if I enable the add-on feature when there is already a device or policy package, maybe both, within the FortiManager? Do they disappear? So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've actually popped a FortiGate inside the FortiManager and imported some policies, and we're going to actually turn on the add-on feature within the FortiManager and we'll see what happens. Okay, so here we are now. We're logged into the FortiManager, and you can see I've gone ahead and ensured that the configuration is being synchronized, and I've imported the policy package. If you click on the Policy and Objects tab, you can see that I've imported the policies that I've created on the FortiGate into a policy package called Test Package, which has 3 policies. The policies are to essentially allow HTTP access between 2 ports, but to block Skype as a source and Dropbox as a destination. So these are just random policies that I've just popped in there just to populate it with something. Now what we're going to do is we're going to enable the add-on feature. So we're going to go System Settings. Then from the System Settings, on the System Information widget, we can see just here the administrative domains. We're going to click Enable, and when we click Enable, it's going to kick us out of the device, and we need to log back in. And here we are, logged back in. Now again, that doesn't actually restart the FortiManager itself, but what it does do is it kicks you out so it can rearrange the actual graphical user interface, the GUI. Now you can see up here that we've got the add-on. Now what it's done is it's actually put the FortiGate under the root add-on. It's not specified any particular add-on because at this point we've not created any. And if we go to the policy and objects, again underneath the root add-on the package actually exists. So to answer the question, it doesn't actually delete anything that may have been pre-populated within the FortiManager, but essentially it dumps everything into the same root add-on. Now obviously what we don't want is a bunch of customers that were originally within the FortiManager to be left inside the same add-on. Ideally what we want is the administrative domains potentially split into different customers. Now the way we do that is we need to create a new add-on and move this particular device inside that add-on. So again, to do this we're going to go to System Settings. We've got to click on the add-on on the left hand side, create new. We're going to give it a name. Device type is a FortiGate. Version, if we go back to the actual FortiGate itself, we can look at the firmware version here, and it says it's 5.2, so we need to select 5.2. If the version is incorrect, then any configurations we do under this add-on and try to install onto the device may result in a syntax error. We're going to just use the normal add-on, keep everything else the same, take the device, move it across, and hit OK. Okay, it's giving me an error because the name of the add-on it doesn't like, so we're just going to just create that as one word there, get rid of that space. Now you can see that there's a add-on created called Mr. Test, and we have one device inside it, which is the only device we have on this FortiManager. If we navigate back to Device Manager, you'll notice now under the root add-on the device is gone, but if we click on the little drop down and click on Mr. Test, you'll notice he's moved into this section. And if we go to the policy and objects, what you will notice is the policy and object is not being imported over. So the way we would need to do this is go back to the device manager, and you'll see it here, it says policy package status never installed. This essentially means that we've never exported the policies from this FortiGate and installed them inside a policy package within the FortiManager. To do this, we're going to simply right click and go to import policy, and it's going to take us through the import policy wizard. Here it's noticed that we're using 2 ports, so we're going to map these 2 ports. What this essentially allows us to do is we can have it where we can have WAN and LAN, and what this essentially will do is on the FortiGate will perceive port 1 as port 1 and port 2 as port 2, but the FortiManager will see these ports as LAN and WAN. The idea being is if you had multiple customers connecting into this, port 1, port 2 may not mean much to them, but renaming the interfaces will obviously allow the end users to create rules and policies far much simpler. But when they go to actually install it, it won't try to install it on the LAN and WAN interface, it'll actually map it back to port 1 and port 2. So it's just more of a convenience essentially. Going to press next on this. Do we want to give it a name? So let's call it test123. Then we have 2 options here under the policy selection and the object selection. We can import all policies, or we can specify what policies we want to import. In this case, we're going to select them all. And under object selection, we have 2 options. We can import only objects that are depending on policies, meaning objects that are used in policies, or every object, whether they're used or not used within a policy. In this case, I'm going to import all of my policies and all of my objects, and that includes whether they are or not within existing policies. Hit next. It's going to go through and search for the dependencies and install it. Here it comes up with conflict. What I mean by this essentially is the FortiGate and FortiManager have noticed that there has been some duplicate entries, and it's asking who would we like to actually allow, or kind of which option do we want to take. So for example, here under the VPN SSL web portal, there are 3 accesses that have been defined. They live on the FortiGate and they live on the FortiManager. So it's asking us, do you want the full access section to be taken from whatever's being configured in the FortiGate, or would you like to actually keep the value that's in the FortiManager currently? So here I'm actually going to say all from FortiGate, because the FortiGate actually has all the up-to-date information that I want, and if anything that's within the FortiManager I want it to be, in this case, overwritten. It will give us an overview of what's going to be installed, and then we're going to import those policies and objects. Once it's been imported, we get the option to download the report, hit finish, and now what would happen is if I click on this and refresh it, you'll notice that the policy package is now shows imported, and underneath the Mr. Test ADOM, going to the policy and objects, you'll see test123, and within test123, those are 3 policies. At this point, what you can do is go back to the root and actually delete the test123 policy package in the root, because of course it's no longer needed. Okay, so hopefully that answered that question and also gave you an insight on how you would import a policy into a policy package within a particular ADOM. So we've talked previously about the device manager, and we said that the device manager is where things like the SNMP settings live, DNS, IP, so where you would set interface, routing, and so forth. Moving on, what we're going to have a discussion around is sort of where you're spending most of your day-to-day changes would be the policy and objects tab. Now, unlike the device manager, this is where we actually make changes to our policies. So for example, if we had a FortiGate with multiple policies and we wanted to allow or deny a particular access to a particular application, this is where we would go about doing that. So let's go through this list very briefly, and then we're going to jump into the FortiManager if we've got time and have a little play around. So what can we do? The policy and object tab, just like the device manager, is split into different ADOMs. We've just seen that, and you have the root. Not only do you have the root, you also have another section of it called global, and I'll get into what the global allows you to do a little bit later. We can also create or customize our policy packages per device or per VDOM. So we created a policy device just a moment ago. Well, once that policy package is being created, we can then import it into multiple devices. So we can have kind of a branch standard config, if you like. And as our FortiGates come online, we can install the same template or same policy package onto those devices. We can manage the policy packages into their own folders. And we can install the policy packages on a single device, multiple devices, all the devices, or VDOMs within a single device. We can also manage not only the policy packages themselves and the objects that link to those policy packages, but we can modify our actual policies. So again, if we wanted to allow, deny, clone, copy, delete, and so forth, this will all be done in here. We also get this new concept, something called an ADOM revision. So the ADOM revision is a key point to pick up within the policy and object tab. To give you an overview, all your policy packages, let's say for example we have a few policy packages, let's say we have policy package 1, 2 and 3. All of these policy packages, if they're all in the same ADOM, they will link back to the same object database. Now that may not seem like an issue to begin with, but let's say for example on policy 1, this is currently set on a FortiGate device, and we've decided that we're going to change or sort of install a new policy package, but part of that policy packages requires a particular object, let's say maybe a new IP range, to be added to a particular policy object that links to a policy within the policy package number 2. At a later date, if you were to revert back to policy package 1, the object database would remain the same as it would or would have been for the policy package 2. So the problem you have is you have a disconnect now between the object database and what you're trying to achieve in the policy packages. To get around this and to almost like take a snapshot and link the policy and objects along with the policy packages together are these ADOM revisions. And ADOM revisions, providing that you go through the install wizard, you have the option to actually create a ADOM revision every time you install or change a policy downstream onto the device. Now in a production environment, you would normally want to create an ADOM revision every time you make a firewall change, because if you are modifying the objects, it will cause a headache later on when people try to deploy different policy packages for different reasons. So what we'll do later is we'll go into actually modifying a policy package and then upgrade it to another policy package, making changes to the object database for that new policy package, and then reverting back to an older policy package and see what effect that has and why those ADOM revisions are important. We'll get into ADOM revisions a lot more as we continue throughout the course. Okay, so the way I want to end this lesson is to give you an overview of the policy and objects. So if we click on the policy and objects tab, straight away, just like I said previously, you can see there's a bunch of ADOMs. There's a global ADOM, root, and the one that we made earlier called Mr. Test. Now if we click on Mr. Test, you're going to see it says local domain policies. This essentially means that we have no policies underneath the policy package called default, but we know that because the policy package that we imported for Mr. Test is actually called test123, and you can see here are the policies that we imported. Now if we were to make a change to any of these policies, they wouldn't take effect until, just like within the device manager, until we actually install the changes that we've made using the install wizard. You can use the reinstall wizard, but the difference being the install wizard will give you the ability to preview the settings, download reports and create ADOM revisions, whereas the reinstall option will simply just push down the configuration onto the device. Now let's say for example we want to modify the existing policy, so here we can simply right click and click add and remove the objects within the destination section. So let's for example enable a new service under this accept up the top, to allow anything from, for some reason, the WAN to the LAN. Let's say we allow ICMP, and you can see the service now has actually added ICMP in, but as I said, none of the changes will take effect until we install it onto the device. Down the bottom, you can see the object database, and like I said previously, all of these policy packages will actually use a single object database, which is down here. So if we were to go in to this address, for example, we could create a new address. So let's say the address name is something like 10.0.0.0. It's going to be a /8. We're going to have no comments against it, and we're just going to click OK. Now you can see there's that new object underneath the firewall and object section. Now if we wanted to, let's say, add a particular source, add objects, and we can see that the object that I created is now here, and we can add it to say, actually, instead of the OR, I'm only going to allow the 10/8 range to be able to go to Dropbox, or in this case, deny only the 10/8 range to Dropbox. So like I said, these policies here obviously are nothing related to any production environment. They're just purely just random things that I've popped in there so we have something to play with. So there's your addresses. You'll also have services. So if we wanted to block a particular service or create a new service, this is where they'll live. Schedules, any traffic shaping, any VIPs, and all your security profiles. So if we had a web filtering profile that we also wanted to apply to this, we can scroll right down to the bottom and we can add some web filtering to that, and you can see the profile shows up here. So the idea with the policy and object is to be able to do most of the object changes that you would expect to find within a FortiGate device. Once you're happy, you can literally go up here and go install wizard, and then we can go through the stages of installing the policy onto the FortiGate. So here, like I said previously, we got the option to create an ADOM revision, and we can give it a name. We can add a comment, so maybe you have a change control number that you need to populate in these. We can schedule the policy package, but instead we're going to hit next on this. We select the device. It will bring up a installation preview where we can preview and download. So maybe you want to take a copy of what changes you're going to make and upload that maybe to a ticket system to prove that you've made the changes, or to help another engineer troubleshoot the change you've made at a later date. And then you click install when you're ready, and it will install the policy. And then finish when you're done. Okay, so that's all we've got time for in this lesson. Let's review what we've learned. First of all, we answered the question. So the question was, what would happen if the FortiManager itself was populated with existing configuration, and then we introduced the concept of an ADOM, and what would be the best practices of moving a device from the root into that new ADOM, and how we would go about importing the policies into a new policy package within that ADOM. And we answered that question, and as part of that question we actually looked at the importing of policies. We noticed that when we imported the policy, we gave it a name, and then it appeared within the policy and object section within the FortiManager. We jumped back to the slide deck and we had a discussion around the policy and objects. So we had very briefly an overview of what the policy and object allows us to do. We said that this is where most engineers are going to spend their day-to-day modifying and editing policy packages and then installing them downstream onto the devices. We had a discussion around the ADOM revision element and why ADOM revisions are so important, because they allow us to essentially take a snapshot of the object database and the policy package, so it allows us to revert any changes back. We then jumped into the FortiManager and we looked at the policy and objects. We created an object, we modified some existing policies, we put some security profiles on those policies, and then we installed them downstream onto the device through the step-by-step wizard. Last but not least, I'd like to thank you for viewing, and I hope this has been helpful, and if it has been, please do like and subscribe.